and those channels, right? We've seen Twitter, we've seen Facebook, Twitter labeling Russian state media. Facebook is removing it from circulation in the EU. YouTube has restricted any sort of advertising on that content in certain places. So I think that the side is a little clearer because it's a U.S.-based company. These are U.S.-based companies, and they are getting pressure from governments in the EU and in the U.S. So I think that it's a little less murky what they have to do here.
Talk to us about how widespread this particular campaign is. I mean, they say they've suspended 40 accounts in 48 hours, but could it be much bigger than that?
You're referring to a operation that Meta found on Facebook and Instagram. I mean, this is the typical kind of thing that they've been looking for years, ever since the 2016 presidential election that involved Russian state interference and spreading of misinformation. This is what they've trained their systems on now, so they're a lot more aware of what to look at. Are they catching everything? Probably not. But this is at least indicative of how they're proactively looking for such things now. It's not like these companies are being blindsided anymore. They are being asked, and not just the companies, but disinformation researchers the world over have been looking for this kind of content and flagging it. So I think that there are a lot more resources, a lot more eyeballs, and the more eyeballs to the problem, the easier it is to solve.
All right, Bloomberg's Sarah Frier, thank you for that update. Meantime, as we just discussed, Meta saying it's disrupted a Russian disinformation operation targeting Ukraine, blocking efforts by a hacking group attempting to compromise the accounts of prominent Ukrainians. I want to get the latest on this from Meta's head of security policy, Nathaniel Gleicher himself. Nathaniel, talk to us about the significance of what you have disrupted so far and what more work there is to do here.
Sure. So we've identified and removed these two separate campaigns. One is an influence operation where these actors were using fake accounts across a whole number of social media networks, Instagram and Facebook, but also on Twitter, on YouTube, on OK and VK, which are Russian social media networks, and their own websites, to try to push messages suggesting that the Ukrainian government is failing or failed, to undermine trust in the Ukrainian government and boost trust in the Russian government. And then separately, this hacking campaign. This is a group known as Ghostwriter, which is a well-known threat actor that operates across Eastern Europe. They have now begun targeting individuals in Ukraine, including at least one journalist and prominent military officials and government-linked officials. And what they're doing is they're hacking in and taking over their personal emails and their devices. And then they're using that to take over all their social media accounts and try to use those accounts to post false narratives or deceptive narratives. The good news is our teams have found and taken action on both of these operations. We've shared that information with our partners in industry. And so far, it doesn't look like they were having a lot of success. So, for example, that influence operation, they only had about 5,000 followers or even a bit less on Facebook and Instagram when they were removed.
So to my next point, 40 accounts in 48 hours. How significant is that really, given that Meta's platforms, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, are massive? Is this just scratching the surface, in terms of how far these disinformation campaigns are running?
Well, this is only one piece of the work that we're doing in Ukraine, and I wouldn't want people to think that this is the only thing that's happening. We've stood up a full special operations center that lets us bring in investigators and product experts from across the company so that we can tackle these challenges. We've rolled out a whole number of new product changes to help keep people stay safe on the platform. But influence operations like this, it's not the size that you need to pay attention to. This is an indication, and it's the first indication we've seen that there are covert influence operations from Russia targeting public debate with Ukraine. There's been a lot of speculation that that's happening. And of course, there's been a lot of focus on overt influence operations from Russian state media and from other corners. But this is the first time we've seen this evidence. It's a good reminder that the threat actors that teams around the world are focused on are targeting this crisis, this invasion, and it's critical that we all remain vigilant to take action on these networks when they appear.
Well, and look, Russian disinformation campaigns are nothing new, as you and I have talked about in the past. Why did it take an invasion to get this kind of action from Meta? on Ukraine? I mean, couldn't you have done this sooner?
So we've enforced on a number of operations targeting Ukraine over the years. And actually, an interesting point, this network in particular, which has in particular stood up and begun engaging as tensions in Ukraine developed, is linked to a network we removed last year in 2020 that we removed from the platform. We know these threat actors keep trying, but one of the indicators of success is that network we removed last year, it had about 250,000 followers on Facebook and Instagram. This network, when they tried to come back, had less than 5,000. And that's the goal here. These threat actors will keep trying, but over time, working with partners across society and improving our systems, we can make it harder for them, we can contain them, and we can ensure that even if they do get on the platforms, they just don't reach that many people before they get taken down.
Look, your head of policy, Nick Clegg, just announced you will be suspending Russian state-run media, RT and Sputnik, in Europe. There are calls for you to do that globally. When you look at the bigger picture, what more do you think Meta and its platforms, its massive platforms, can do to crack down on this kind of disinformation?
So we've already taken a number of steps on Russian state media. We have removed their ability to run ads and demonetize them around the world. As Nick mentioned, in response to requests from the Ukrainian government and the EU government, we blocked them, a number of specific Russian state media entities, from broadcasting into the EU and into Ukraine. We're taking a whole range of other steps to essentially de-amplify their ability to share information on our platforms. And also we have third-party fact checkers that are continuing to review content posted by Russian state media entities and other entities around the world. And when they identify something as false or misleading, we label that to make sure people can see that, and we downrank it so it doesn't appear in people's feeds and people are less likely to encounter the information.
Meantime, you've got the Russian government asking you to take stuff down. How are you handling those requests, looking at the other side of the coin?
We're going to be consistent with our policies. The Russian government has asked us to remove fact checks from Russian state media publications, where the third-party fact checkers I mentioned have determined that they were making statements that were false or misleading. We've refused to do that. Those fact checks are still available. Our third-party fact checkers are still fact-checking content from around the world, including from Russian state media. And actually, in the meantime, we've identified and labeled a number of additional Russian state media entities. So we're continuing to push. In fact, we'll be likely identifying and labeling more as time passes and our investigators continue to work.
And what can you tell us about cooperation between Meta and Twitter and TikTok and YouTube on these efforts? I know that that kind of coordination is something that's been happening for a few years now.
Yeah, coordination across industry is absolutely critical because threat actors like the ones we're talking about don't just target one social media platform. I mentioned that the influence operation we took down targeted a number of social media platforms. Similarly, that hacking group, Ghostwriter, they begin by compromising personal email and then using that to get to a whole bunch of different social media accounts. Whenever we find an operation like this, we share information with our partners so that they can investigate and they can take action themselves on violations on their platform. And then they share information back with us so that we can do the same thing. One of the biggest changes from 2016, even from 2018, is that today there are determined expert teams at social media platforms around the world, in government and in civil society, that are working to defend against these types of threats and are sharing information with each other so we can all counter them as a whole of society response.
All right, Meta Head of Security Policy, Nathaniel Gleischer, thank you so much, as always, for joining us to talk about the work you're doing. Meantime, TikTok users can now upload videos up to 10 minutes long. This after months of testing. TikTok has been expanding its video length ever since its creation, going from an initial 15 seconds to 60 seconds and then most recently 3 minutes. TikTok says it hopes this will unleash even more creative possibilities for creators around the world. Longer videos could allow more context. However, critics say this also opens the door for more misinformation and disinformation, especially in the midst of the ongoing crisis in Ukraine. Coming up, tens of thousands of Ukrainians fleeing their war-torn country now able to access homes on Airbnb for free. More on that pledge from CEO Brian Chesky next. This is Bloomberg.